Hello, my name is Farhad Bahram, and I want to thank you first for giving me this opportunity to talk about my research and specifically this project that I'm working on right now. It is still in progress, and you actually see part of it um, there in the exhibition space called Made in Iran. I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there in person. It is actually very ironic because most of my recent projects and my research is about issues related to immigration and specifically travel ban in the United States and how it affects individual immigrants, especially Iranian individuals who are living in the States. And it is ironic because I couldn't actually be there because of the same issue. I couldn't be there to talk about my research regarding immigration because I'm an immigrant and I cannot leave the country right now because of my immigration case. So I appreciate that you give me this opportunity to send you this recorded video about my project. Since I don't have much time, I'm going to jump into the discussion about my research practice and how I started my practice in a way that actually led me toward this project that you can see part of it through this exhibition. So the main subject of my research is as you can see here, is called impotent medium. And what I'm working on is basically the medium of communication, is particular medium of communication that cannot be conceived or received through conventional form because it constantly negates itself throughout the process of reception. For that reason, I call it the impotent medium. In order to clarify this concept, I would like to talk about myself first. The image that you can see here in this slide, this photograph, is actually me when I was 2 years old. And this photograph, you can also see my parents, my father at the bottom corner and my mother at the top right corner. They were both present in this photograph. But since I was a child, I always had this kind of like weird feeling about the presence of my parents, both my father and my mother in my life. And even right now, when I think about my childhood memories, about their appearance in my life, and also the way in which I experienced my interaction with them throughout my childhood, is somehow related to this topic that I'm working on right now. My mother had a very quintessential presence. She had a very soft presence in my life. She was kind of like invisible, like very quiet in the space everywhere that I was going as a child. She was always looking after me, but her presence was so soft and light that I couldn't physically see her around, but I could always feel that she is somewhere very close if I needed her. She had this kind of like character that I would call invisible presence. She had an invisible presence in my life. My father, on the other hand, he had kind of like the opposite quality. He was very bold, his presence, and sometimes very overwhelming. He was like this object of panopticon that looks at you everywhere, and like you felt that like there is nothing that you could do that falls out of his uh, surveillance. And he was in charge of controlling all different aspects of our life. But we had kind of like the minimum interaction. The interaction that I had with my father was not as quintessential and pervasive as the interaction that I had with my mother. Minimum interaction, but very bold and empowering. So he had this kind of like character that I would rather to call visible absence. So this kind of like dichotomy of presence of my parents in my life was extended into my practice later on when I started my professional practice as a photojournalist. I started to discover the same quality in the images that I was capturing through my camera. So these images that I'm showing you are some of the photographs that I captured throughout a 2.5 years project by traveling around Iran and visiting indigenous people, indigenous cultures around Iran, especially those cities that are closer to the border of Iran, western border and northwestern border of Iran. And with the help of another photographer and a writer, we were gathering the stories of people's life, and preparing material to be published in a newspaper in Tehran called Hamshahri newspaper. So these are some of those photos that were published. And when I was capturing these photos, obviously, because we were telling the story of these people, we had to get close to them, and we had to get very intimate with them in order to actually convince them to open up and share the story of their life. So with each of these persons, we had to spend at least like few days, 3-4 days, to just follow them, talk to them, so they could walk us through their daily life. And throughout that process, we were getting very close with most of them, and they were sharing the story of their lives with us. So there was kind of like some sort of intimacy happening between us. And after publishing these photos, sometimes like after, for example, 2 or 3 years, when I was going back to these images and looking at them, I was feeling the absence of that intimacy in them. I had this feeling that I couldn't successfully project that intimacy that we were experiencing there as the producer of these images and these stories on personal level through our wordings and the text-based story, and also even the images that we were capturing. So this dichotomy that I was talking about regarding my parents was still present there in those photographs. I could actually somehow find a connection between them, like the images that are or the photographs that are capturing the human essence of these individuals, or are supposed to capture the human essence of this individual, but there is something invisible there. Although it should be there, it's at the surface at least. You expect to see it there, but because I know that there were some kind of like close emotional interaction that I had with them, and I know that it is not there in these photographs because I was the photographer. So there is a visibility of their presence and also invisibility of that intimacy in them. And I was struggling with this kind of like duality in the photographs that I was capturing, that why they are not so truthful, at least to the experience that I had firsthand as a photographer. So I started to become interested in these discussions about mediumship and what is the relationship between medium and its content, and how it can be conveyed successfully, and how we can be truthful to the content of a medium that is supposed to communicate an intimate message. So it was around that time that I started to practice. To change the course of my practice, I became very interested in the discussions around contemporary photography and photography as a medium, visual medium of communication. So I had a big turn from photojournalism to photography as an art practice. I started to read lots of texts, lots of books, and I kind of changed my practice. I moved to the United States. I started to study photography at San Francisco Art Institute more seriously. I stopped being photojournalist in general, and I started to get familiar with some of these texts, including, for example, Camera Lucida by Roland Barthes, and I found lots of variety of different answers to those questions that I had about this relationship between the signs that are supposed to be in a visual medium, but they're actually not there, and what is the relationship between their presence and absence of them in a photograph. So Roland Barthes was saying that in that book, he was saying that ultimately, or at the limit, in order to see a photograph well, it is best to look away or close your eyes. So he's suggesting that there is some quality in each photograph that is not tactile, that is not visual or haptic. It's not presence at the surface of it. We cannot see those those qualities if you just rely on your eye, if you just rely on your visual perception. You need to look away for a moment in order to go beyond the surface of those photographs and see what is hidden or embedded within the visual layer of photographs. It was a very interesting concept to me. I could at least make kind of like a loose sense of kind of like this question that I had about the relationship between medium and image. He also brings out a quote from Franz Kafka when he said, "We photograph things in order to drive them out of our minds, as my stories are a way of shutting my eyes." Apparently, Franz Kafka had the same idea about his stories. He was inviting his readers to don't rely on the actual lines of his story, don't rely on the wordings and grammar and letters. He was inviting his reader to just close their eyes and read in between the lines. He believed that the main point of his stories are not written through texts, but they are in between the text, similar to the way in which we look at a photograph, according to Roland Barthes. So I was very interested in this, became very interested in this subject, and I thought that I have to do something about it. I need to create something about this kind of like semi-pseudo research that I was having. And I also got familiar with this kind of duality of mediumship, as Roland Barthes actually defines. He defines that any kind of medium that you use for communication has two layers: connotative layer and denotative layer. Denotative layer is the layer that you have access to, like literally, it's tangible layer of communication, like texts and words and grammars and the colorful pigments on a print, or visual shapes that you see at the surface of a photograph or a painting. These are the denotative layer of it, but there is a hidden and connotative layer there that is not visible, and you can only feel that, and that feeling should be activated through different modes of communication. For example, if you don't know a certain language, like Farsi, when I start to speak Farsi to you, for example, اگر من فارسی با شما صحبت کنم، اگر شما فارسی ندونید، خیلی از شما متوجه نمیشید من چی میگم. So for that few seconds, I intentionally blocked your access to the denotative aspects of this communication. For a few seconds, I spoke to you in a language that perhaps, or I assume that you don't know, but at the same time, the communication is still active. You're still there. You're still looking at me. You can still hear the tone of my voice. You can still see the movement of my hands, my body language. So the communication is still active. The only thing that is absent here is the denotative aspect of my language. So when this denotative aspect of language becomes blocked, then the only way to remain active in this communication is to pay attention to the connotative aspect of it, to pay attention to my physical appearance in front of you and the tone of my voice and such things. So I was thinking about a way to activate that connotative layers in the medium of communication, and I was trying to find different ways to do that, until I came around this play. This is a play written by Matei Vizhniak. It has a very funny long title. It says the story of the panda bears told by a saxophonist who had a girlfriend in Frankfurt. So Matei Vizhniak is a Romanian-French playwright, and most of his plays are about the glorious modern human, which, despite of being a conqueror of the world and finding all of those unknown knowledge that was always hidden to humankind, by bringing that to the awareness during the modern era. And despite of that, they are still having trouble in communication. They cannot communicate with each other effectively. So in most of his plays, you see characters that are not able to effectively communicate with each other, including in this play. This is a play about two characters known as him and her. And throughout this story, you get introduced to him when he wakes up one day in his bedroom. And he noticed that someone is lying down beside him, known as her. So both of them, they don't have name. And then he starts to freak out. He asks her, he wakes up her, and then he asks her, what is she doing there, and who is she? And then she gets surprised because he cannot remember her. So she tries to help him to retrieve that lost memory and makes him to remember her and the experience that they had with each other a night before, but there is no use in that because he cannot actually remember anything. So they make this arrangement for her to come back every night for 7 days to his apartment and help her to retrieve that memory. So throughout the play, throughout those 7 days, they try several forms of communication, but nothing works, and he cannot remember anything until the last night, the last day. when they try a new form of communication with each other, and the story ends there. I made this small short video about that last interaction. Let's look at this first, and then I will continue. And this is how the story ends. So this was kind of like an epiphany for me. I started to find clear answer to the questions that I had, especially regarding to the process of practicing what I discovered, how I can make a medium that actually activates the connotative layer of it. It clearly happened at the end of this play. So when they see that none of the conventional form of communication works for them, they start with dissecting the conventional form, or dissecting the language. This is the term that I would like to use. So instead of using the whole word, they start to just like use one letter, the letter A, and they started to communicate through that one letter. And then in the middle of that attempt, they suddenly decided to actually even remove that dissected language. And the removal of that dissected language allowed them to reveal the connotative aspect of that communication, which was just silence and just like looking at each other. So if you see the actual play, toward the end of the play, for a few minutes, they were just like staring at each other without uttering any word, without any movement. They were just like looking at each other's eyes, and that's how the story ends. It was fascinating to me that like how they came up with this solution. I was wondering how I can actually create something like this. How can I create a dissected medium somehow, with the hope of revealing its content? So I started to do a little bit more research on this. I called this dissected medium the impotent medium, because it is impotent of communication. It cannot communicate clearly. I mean, what is the meaning of the letter A? How you can communicate with A? A is an impotent language, right? But at the end of the day, through this impotent medium, you're able to convey the message, the connotative message that I was looking for, right? So I started to work on this project as a test in 2011 when I was still in Iran, in the city of Tehran. I created a Facebook account without putting any real information about myself. And I started to invite random people that I don't know. I just found them randomly in Facebook. And the only criteria that I was following was that they had to be in the same city that I live in the city of Tehran. So I sent about 500 messages to random people through Facebook. And the content of this message was this: that I'm an artist working on an art project. I'm inviting you to meet me in any location that you want, a location of your choice in the city of Tehran. And I'm intentionally not giving you any information about myself and what is this project about. Once we met, we are going to talk about the projects, and I will share more information. And the second request that I had was to bring an object to the meeting. So if I asked them if you accepted to meet me in a certain location, your location of your choice, at any during any time of the day, any time of the day that you want. Then you also need to bring me an object, a souvenir, an object that you should feel free to share actually that object with me. So it should be something that doesn't have any personal value to you. So out of those 500 messages, I received about 50 responses from people. And out of those 50 responses, I was able to meet about 25 people in different locations in the city of Tehran, and they brought me objects to see some example of them. So throughout that conversation that I had with them, I captured a portrait of them and also an image of the objects that they shared with me. So you can see some examples of it here. So what is this object? This object is something that I was hoping that I could kind of like render those objects somehow as the dissected object or the dissected medium. So the way that I was thinking about this project during the process of ideation was that I'm going to put these subjects in a situation that is not known to them. So they are being reached out by someone that they don't know. That person doesn't share any information about himself. And they don't know what is going to happen in that meeting, why actually they should accept that meeting, first of all, and what is going to happen there. Who is that person? Is he lying actually, or should I trust that person or not? So there are lots of mixed feelings about it, like the sense of curiosity is one of them, the sense of insecurity, of course, is another one, and lots of kind of like mixed feeling that I was hoping that they could experience. And amidst of all of those feelings, they had to also choose an object. So I was hoping that that object that they choose could manifest that uncertainty somehow, that mixed feeling that they have inside of themselves. If I was giving them enough information, then they could actually choose that object very deliberately based on those information, and I couldn't achieve my goal. So I wanted to keep them on that situation, unbalanced situation, so the objects could be the manifestation of the feeling that they had. So this object somehow becomes the conveyed message, denotative message of their feeling, the feeling of meeting someone that is unknown. And in many cases it worked. Like in many of them, this object became the denotative object somehow. So for example, this one was a great example. She happened to be an artist. I didn't know that. And she said that she told me that she responded to my message by saying that I'm really curious to know what is this project about, but I have some sort of rule for my personal life. I don't meet people that I don't know. Like out of blue. So what I want to do is to actually meet you online. You never said like it needs to be a physical location. I can meet you online through video chat, and I will send you my object as a digital file. It was very interesting. It was a very interesting response. So I accepted that. So she met me through an online video chat, and she sent me an image of one of her artworks actually as the object. Or this one was also a very interesting example. So she gave me this X-Acto knife, and when I asked her why this knife, she said, I was so curious and afraid at the same time. I was feeling I was afraid of my kind of like security. They're meeting someone that I don't know in the middle of the city, a large city like Tehran. So I thought I'm going to have this object as my souvenir, and also at the same time, if something happened, I can use it to secure myself. So it was very interesting to me that how many of these objects became kind of like the manifestation of the feeling that they had. Without these objects, I couldn't actually find access to that genuine feeling that they had during the time of receiving that message, because we as human beings, we usually tend to block those negative feelings, right? So if there was not this object during our meeting, she could just like hide all of those mixed feeling and try to be like appropriate in the discussions and show an appropriate version of herself, right? But this object somehow actually revealed that for me during that communication. So the image that you see on the left is basically the photojournalistic representation of that person, something that I was doing for many years before. But the picture on the right is this new discovery, this artistic representation of that person that I was looking for. This is another example, another project that I did when I moved to Oregon at the University of Oregon to continue my research, called re-identification, which talks about the same concept. In this project, I confined myself inside a pedestal. I made this pedestal and I positioned my body inside of it. There was a hole at the top of the pedestal and my head was popping out. There was another pedestal beside the main one, and I had several shaving tools on them. And the performance was happening in the public space, so people who were passing by could actually grab any of those shaving tools and shave my hair and facial hair in any way that they want. So the way that I was situating myself there, and my head specifically there, was completely passive, which means that I wasn't interacting with anyone. I wasn't looking at anyone, I wasn't making any eye contact, and I didn't respond to any communication. So I was basically presenting my head as an object on the pedestal, so they could reform it in any way that they want, like in sculpture. It was a very interesting experience, but this time for me, all of those mixed feelings that I mentioned about my subjects or participants in previous projects, now in this project I experienced them myself. The feeling, the sense of vulnerability, the sense of even joyfulness of having this sort of interaction with other people, the sense of wonder about people's interaction and how they feel about this interaction was very interesting to me. But my goal with this performance was actually exactly the same thing. I was hoping that I could dissect this physical appearance of myself somehow in a very metaphoric and somehow literal way. So I was always thinking about my body and my physical appearance, especially after I moved to the United States and by experiencing this cultural change, was thinking about my physical appearance like this large, giant dude with black, dark facial hair and hair that is so different than people from another culture, is basically the denotative aspect of my identity. This is how my identity is being defined by others, by looking at my physical appearances. So I was thinking that, like, if it is possible to somehow dissect that and find a way into the connotative aspect of my identity, what the thing that I really want to expose about myself that is beyond my physical appearance. So I decided to choose my hair and facial hair, because in Iranian culture, the way that you trim your hair and facial hair is very important. First of all, it is very personal. And second, it identifies your political point of view, your religious stand, your social level even, the way that you trim your hair and facial hair. So it's a very personal aspect of your identity, and just exposing that and allowing people to change that personal aspect of your identity was a bold move for me personally first, and I was hoping that it could kind of like depict this dissection of the surface of identity at some level for the people who were participating in the project. It was a very interesting experience. As you can see, some people, they had a very joyful interaction. Some people, they were very polite and considerate. Some people, they were crying while doing this. I had a wide range of different reactions to this project. At the end of 2 hours of this performance, I ended up without any hair and facial hair on my face. So this is my thesis project, my graduation project called and you know what does that title, that title refers to. It refers to the same play that I showed you. So in this project, I practice the same concept, the same thing. The project has 2 parts. One part includes a wall piece, a large digital print, and also this book. The book is the title of this book is "The Severed Head," written by Julia Kristeva, the feminist writer, which was a very interesting book, especially to me that time when I was involved with these ideas and these theories. This book helped me a lot to find my way through them, talking about the relationship between head and body parts to identity, the collective identity as in general. So I thought that I have to use this book somehow in my project. So what I did, I grabbed the book and I used masking tape, and I covered all of the textual elements in the books, line by line, word by word, with that masking tape throughout the whole book, except the word heads. So wherever I was seeing the word head, I was just like leaving that unmasked. So the only textual element that you can read throughout the whole book is the word head. There were, I think, something around 60 something, 65 words of head throughout the whole book. And the other component was actually this wall piece that I'm showing you, which shows a self-portrait of a body that is curled into itself, like a fetus inside the womb. You don't see the head of the body because of the angle of the photograph. The other thing that I applied to this digital image, digital print, was covering the surface of the whole print with the same red masking tape that I used for the book. But this time, after I covered the whole print, I started to remove the tapes one by one. So those white marks that you see on the prints are actually the parts that remained after the process of removal. Those are the areas that were peeled off from the print with the tape when I was removing them. So I somehow left some scars and destruction at the surface of print by doing that. The only difference is that this time on the print, the body was left exposed rather than the head, which I had in the book. The second part of this installation was about 65 bricks, the same number as the number of head that was exposed in the book. These are kiln bricks. They are very fragile. And what I did was translating a complete book against interpretation by Sozan Samtak from English to Farsi. So I used these permanent markers that you see there. It took a lot of them. And I just wrote the whole book in Farsi, translated and wrote it down by hand at the surface of all of these bricks. So this was the installation before the opening, and during the opening, audience were allowed to actually enter into the space, go through the book and walk on the text, the written text in Farsi. But the thing is that all of the visual materials that they were experiencing in the space were somehow destroyed, dissected, and destructed, either initially or even by themselves. In terms of the bricks, when they were walking on those bricks, the bricks were starting to dismantle and fall apart because, as I said, they were very weak. So because of their interaction, they were basically destroying the bricks. And also in terms of the print and the book, they were also already redacted by the artist, so they couldn't actually have access to the main the main denotation of the text, because the denotative aspects of the language was redacted by the red masking tape, and also print was somehow destroyed. And also you don't have any information about the individual that you see on the print because his head is actually not exposed. So this is what I ended up with at the end of the exhibition. I'm going to talk about this last project called Intersecting Body that I did last year in Oregon. For this project, I did a collaboration with 6 professional dancers. Actually, it was a collaborative project. There was a sculptural piece that you can see here involved in this project. There are 4 plexiglasses attached to each other that creates kind of like a closed space. So I can find myself inside this glass box. And at the surface of glass box, what you can see is actually a written text in Farsi again. So the text cannot be read by the audience, similar to the text on the brick. The targeted audience were, of course, American audience, so I was assuming that they don't know Farsi, so I was intentionally blocking their access to the text in both cases. In this case, the text tells a story of, it's a short story that I wrote many years ago about a man who is trapped inside a small room, and after a while, he starts to feel that he's becoming part of the walls that surrounds him, so his body was emerging into the walls, and he documented that experience. So this is the story, but written in Farsi, which means that people couldn't read, American audience, they couldn't read this story. So I situated myself inside the box, and then we performed this piece 6 times in 6 different parts of the city of Eugene in Oregon. And each time we performed this with one different dancer. Each dancer, they had a unique choreographed movement in tandem with me inside the box. The choreographer of the whole project was Shannon Mockley. She's an associate professor of dance at the University of Oregon. So each of these dancers, they're coming from different social class and also different, they have different political and social views and situation in their life. One of the dancers, he belonged to LGBTQ community, and he was very active. And as part of his research in dance, his graduate research, he was developing some movements that was related to some aspects of his experience as a member of LGBTQ movement. So the movement of his body was kind of like related to the social experience of being part of that community, which was very interesting, the way that we practiced the movement in tandem with each other. So when the performance was at the beginning of the performance, the dancer was approaching to the box, and then we were starting to communicate with each other through the movement of body without any dialogue. And the dance had 3 movements. Each movement had its own story. And through these movements, we were trying to understand each other and explore each other within the space, and find kind of like a dialogue through the position of the body and movement of the body. These are some examples. Another dancer, she was an immigrant, Mexican immigrant. The other dancer, he used to be in army, but he decided to actually come out of the army and live the life of free soul. Like he was an amazing individual. So he completely changed his life and lived like freely, free of all of those rules and boundaries of an individual who serves at the army. So each of these persons, they have their own story, and we wanted to actually communicate through that without having access to the denotative aspects of our character. They didn't know about those texts. They didn't know about me. We were not able to actually talk to each other, of course, at a metaphoric level. And the only way that we could have access to each other was through the movement of the body. Even in a very literal way. In this space, we were in a different location. Like I was confined inside a box. I couldn't come out of the box. It was like a prison for me. They were outside of the box. They were outside of that confinement. So we were in completely two different spaces. I was kind of like wrapped by the element of my culture and traditions, which was manifested through the Farsi text. I was imprisoned within these traditional elements, but again, metaphorically, and they were outside of that. They didn't have access to it. They didn't have access to the inside of this culture. They couldn't speak my language, but we were still able to communicate with each other in all of those 6 dances that happened actually throughout those performances. And finally, this is the project that is related to what you see in the exhibition. This is a project called Looking Glass. We started to work on this project in 2018. It is part of a traveling exhibition called Before We Were Banned. So the whole exhibition is a group exhibition, consists of several artists, and all of those artists, all of them are from those countries who were initially included the first travel ban bill in the United States. Artists from Somalia, from Iran, from Syria, from those 6 countries actually that were included in the travel ban. So my contribution to that group show, traveling show, was this project called Looking Glass. For this project, I interviewed 12 Iranian individuals who are living in the United States, either students or immigrants or people who are working here. And they were those people whose life were affected by the travel ban on different levels. So I invited them and I interviewed them about their experience and how travel ban actually affected their life, the difficulties that they had throughout these years. And I talked about their identity, that how they think their identity and the way in which they want to represent their identity is being affected because of this political feud between the United States and Iran. So the most common concerns among all of those discussions coming from them was this idea that because of these political tensions, the way in which we want to present ourselves in the society as an immigrant is being affected because of this political issues, and we are not able to express ourselves freely in any way that we want. Every aspect of our identity and individuality is affected by those pre-assumptions regarding our nationality and where we are coming from. So I thought that I have to do something with this idea throughout this project. I asked them to write me a list of words in Farsi again that represents their identity in any way that they want. I asked them to just go beyond nationality. Don't think about their, I asked them to not think about their nationality, about their gender, about their job and profession. Just think about their pure self. If they have this chance to introduce themselves to people around them through a list of words, what are those words? And I asked them to write them down in Farsi. So they sent me those words, and I used vinyl and vinyl cutter to cut those words on vinyl, as you can see here. And I in the exhibition, I covered the whole wall of the exhibition space, all of the walls in the exhibition space with those words. You can see part of the installation here. And then there was a video channel of their face and their facial expression while during the interview and while talking and thinking about those issues that they experienced because of the travel ban. So I had a camera zoomed into their face, and I was recording their facial expression actually throughout the interview. So the video was being played in the space, and the rest of the walls were covered with the text of their identity, actually. So when audience were entering into the space, they were somehow enwrapped by the identity of these individuals, the identity that they don't have access to. They cannot read it because they don't know these individuals. They don't know about their culture. They cannot talk or speak with them in the same language that they speak with. But at some level, they can connect with them when they look at their faces. Although it's an unknown territory, it's an unknown space filled with unknown language and unknown forms of identity. But by just like looking at their face and looking at their facial expression, they can feel that they are close to them. They know them. They know how they feel. They know why they are sad. They know why they are angry. They know why they are happy or not happy. And that's kind of like a universal way of understanding each other, and go beyond the cultural barriers and cultural limitations. So that was the whole idea with this project. So what you see right now there is the second phase of this project. It's an extension of this project that I'm working on for about a year. I decided to add a second level to this project by adding something that is more tangible for the audience regarding the identity of those individuals. I wanted the audience to be able to touch that identity, the things that is being covered by the denotative barrier of culture, something that becomes so connotative to the point that you can actually hold it in your hand. How that abstract connotative part of their identity could be manifested in that object. That was my question, if I could even do that or not. So what I did was using software, Face OSC, which is a very simple application that allows you to actually read the facial expression, the movement of muscle in the face. This is a very basic software that they usually use for facial recognition softwares by making it more advanced. So when you feed the videos of faces into this software, the software tries to actually map the specific location on the face, like for example the cheekbones, the nose, upper lips, lower lips, eyelids. The software maps the location of these points and also the change of them in the space. Like when the wides are going to be wider, the change of the location in this space will be mapped as digital data through this software. Then I wrote with processing, which is a language software, language coding program. Java-based program. I wrote a program that was actually extracting this data from face OSC and translate them into a digital database as numbers. So for each of these parts of the face, I had a different input of digital data for the eye, left eye, right eye, nose, and lips. And then once I gathered those data, I used software called Blender for 3D modeling, and I arbitrarily mapped out those 8 inputs that I gathered from their face of each of these individuals into the movement of a mass, 3D objects in the 3D space through Blender. So for example, it was arbitrarily, as I said, so if the mouth was becoming open, like wider than normal, then the mass in the space was moving toward y-axis faster. So it was being stretched toward y-axis faster. If the eye was being closed, for example, I mapped it this way, that the mass was actually twisting along the x-axis, like with a certain rate based on the openness or wideness of the eye. So I mapped any of those, each of those outputs to something or a force that would change the objects in the space. So I ended up with something like this. I'm going to show you a video that shows what happens to that object when in a live view when the video is being played, and how that data is being gathered through processing. Let me show this to you in this video. So in this video, what you see on the left is what happens to the object inside the Blender. And on the right, on the top right, you see the actual face when face OSC tracks the movement of different parts of the face, and on the bottom you see the processing program that I wrote, which actually extracts those data inputs and save them into a digital database. And you can see that how the objects in the Blender is responding to the change of muscles on the face right now. When the muscles starts to move, the object also gets deformed, responding to that move. So basically, for each of those individual, I ran their video input into the same through the same process, and for each of those individual, I had one unique object of their facial expression, basically. And I'm going to show you. Hopefully, the objects are there and you can actually see them. But here is an example of at least one of them that I'm going to show you. So those objects, when I created them through Blender, I was actually able to print them with 3D printer. And this is one of them. So I used the 3D printer to actually print all of those objects. So in the exhibition space there, you can see 4 of them, and also the 4 videos that are associated to each of these objects, the 4 individuals whose facial expressions are being manifested through these objects. So this was the project that I'm working on still. It is still in progress, and you see actually part of it there. I want to thank you again for sharing your time with me, and also giving me this opportunity to talk about my practice and my projects. It was my pleasure to share this with you. I wish you have a great time with the rest of the conference and enjoy the rest of the programs and events. Thank you.